Greetings, family. Sister Shanice in the house, and we are live for another fantastic, blacktastic, boombastic show for you today. Welcome to the Sister Shanice Show platform. On this platform, I feature a whole range of programs. I do interviews, news reviews, and I look at issues from an African-centered perspective. And for the last 10 episodes or so, I've been running a series of shows where we've been looking at Black history, African history, hidden in plain sight. And for those of you who have been following, you will know that we've been going through this book, To Hell or Barbados, The Ethnic Cleansing of Islands, which is essential reading for all of us, really, because what it's actually talking about and reminding us about is the fact that there were hundreds of thousands of us as Africans who are the original indigenous people of Ireland, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, for that matter, who were transplanted from Britain to the colonies. That's to the Caribbean and to the America. And it's been a very interesting read because, you know, our history is embedded some of our history is embedded in this book. And so I've been going through that book, and I will be reading a couple of pages, at least a page or two from that book today, as I have been doing over previous episodes. However, today, if you're in the UKKK, it would not have escaped you that one of our beloved brothers, Professor Jason Arday, who you can see in this picture here, was hounded to death. He was basically flogged by the media, flogged so much so, MPs and lords are basically calling it a lynching, a modern day public lynching, to the point where this young brother, his life is no more. Tragically, he was found unresponsive, unalived last Friday. There obviously needs to be a coroner report to actually determine the cause of death. It's widely speculated that he took his own life, but who knows? There may have been some foul play. So we can't be speculating about that on the program today. But what we do absolutely know is that this beautiful young soul has been taken from us at a time when he was the center of a huge row involving extreme right-wingers, the Cambridge University, where he was a professor, and the mainstream British press. So we're going to be going into what happened and the circumstances surrounding this young man up until his actual passing. But before I go into today's program, I just want to welcome you as you come through the door. I can see Brother Kwame Oboje is in the house as well. Rise up, Brother Kwame Oboje. Sister Kev beat you in the house today. Sister Kev's already in the house. Rise up, Sister Kev. Great to have you in the house. Brother Kwame, being from the UKKK, I know you are going to be very familiar with the story that I'm going to be covering today. And although I have, been doing a series on To Hell or Barbados, I'm still going to contextualize today's presentation within the context of that particular book. So we're going to be continuing with the theme, but I'm going to contextualize recent modern day events within the context of our history, which is really, really important, because we have to learn from history, and we have to recognize that, you know, history was yesterday, history was last year, history was a decade ago, a century ago. And, you know, we are continuing a fight that started centuries ago. Rise up, everybody. So Sister Karen, you know, from America is saying, damn shame. Yes, sis, we're going to let you know what's been happening here in the UKKK. We got our Bevis in the house as well. our Breviews, welcome 906. Great to have you in the house. Brother Kwame, it's great to have you in the house and to hear your comments. So now, if you want to leave your comments, thoughts, and opinions, you can do so by logging into your YouTube account and then joining us on the live chat. We've got Aviva in the house. Welcome, welcome. Great to have you join us today. We want to make sure that you get a perspective that you may not be getting, you certainly won't be getting from the mainstream media today on what's been going on in the UKKK. Alrighty, I'm ready to rock and roll. Are you ready? Or should we give the family 1 or 2 more minutes to come through the door? So I just want to welcome you as you come through the door. Let me put up my welcome banner to welcome the family. Welcome, welcome, family. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to come before you. I don't take your visit to this platform for granted. I know that you could be visiting one of millions of other platforms out there. So I'm honored that you are joining me this evening. I've got a very interesting show lined up for you today. And we're also going to be looking not just at our history, but also current affairs and current matters as well. So if you're new to this channel, welcome, welcome. Please do subscribe to the channel. Please do like and share and encourage others to actually join us here on this channel, where we're going to be dealing with, as always, some very serious truths from an African center's perspective, because family, we need to get prepared. The right wingers are very well organized and very well prepared in this country. In fact, not just this country, okay? But because we're in the UKKK, we're talking about this country. The right wingers are very well prepared. They've got their media lined up to back them up. They've got their government systems in place. They've got the police, the right wingers within the police force and within, all aspects of society. They are well organized. But what about us, who are the potential victims of their hatred? And I can't put it, any other way, because, that is the case. And this is what, today's show is actually going to highlight the extent to which, that hatred still prevails within our society. And therefore, the requirement for us to prepare, because things are going to get worse before they get better. And if we don't prepare, then things are going to just get way out of control. And we know how far we're coming from. The series that we've been running to hell or Barbados, the ethnic cleansing of Ireland, is a reminder of where we're coming from. It's a reminder of the struggle and the journey that we have been on for the last few hundred years. And there's absolutely no way, family, that we should allow ourselves to go back to that place in time where, it wasn't a media flogging that we would be getting. It would have been a physical flogging. It would have been a physical lynching. It would have been a physical, we would have been physically hung, drawn, and quartered. We would be physically whipped until the skin would have been removed from our skin. And so we have to remember the journey that we're on and where we're coming from and how far we have come, because we cannot afford to go back there. And there are those, it seems, who are living among us within the institutions and organizations where we were, who feel that, we should be back there. And they want to treat us any old how. And if we allow it, if we allow them to get away with it, family, the life for our children and children's children in this country will be hell on earth. And so we have to be the ones to push back. We have to be the ones to fight. We have to be the ones who stand up and say enough is enough and be prepared to take action. Okay, that is our job and our role, family, here today, to take action where necessary and to support those who are, who are in challenging workplace situations or in challenging life situations. Okay. Absolutely critical, absolutely essential. And family, back in the days, you know, when I was in the workplace, you know, fortunately, for me and my generation, we were part of, you know, a very progressive, proactive generation. And so in my workplace, you know, we had the Black Workers Group, we had the Black sections within the trade unions, we had the Black sections within the political parties, we had the Black sections within our communities, Black organizations, you know, and the expectation was that we would all belong to a Black organization. Why? Because of the support that we get when we come together in these organizations. We can't be isolated and alone in these institutions and organizations, family, because otherwise we get ripped apart, and we get abused. And nobody wants to go to work and be the victim of abuse. Okay. And so it's incumbent upon us, therefore, that whilst we're working within these institutions and organizations, that we form Black workers groups and Black workers network, if there isn't one, and that we come together and support each other. Yeah, it doesn't matter how high you rise within their system, within their society. It is their society as they see it, in their system, their institutions. And if they want to come together and make life hell for us, then the case that we're going to be discussing today is going to be proof in the pudding that they will make our life hell. Yeah, and they can make our lives hell. And not all of us, sadly, family, are fit enough to cope with the hell that they can unleash. Who wants to be living in hell? Nobody wants to be living in hell. You know, we all want a peaceful, happy, you know, comfortable life for ourselves and our families and our communities. But there are those who are intent on making our life hell. And how are we going to survive that hell if we don't come together? And so it's critically important, family, that we come together and we support each other within the workplace, within the community, within whatever organization or institution that we're part of, irrespective of how high you climb. You know, you are still going to need support. Our young man, Professor Jason Arday, was a professor at Cambridge University, the youngest ever professor, you know, according to their statistics, to have entered Cambridge University. And you're going to hear about, if you haven't already heard, maybe, you know, because I know I've got followers from all around the world, and you may not, you know, be getting the news that we're getting here in the UKKK, that you're going to be hearing about how this young professor, despite being a professor at one of the most prestigious organizations or educational institutions in the UK, was actually hounded by the university and the press. Rise up, family. Let me see who we've got in the house. Yeah, the family's coming through the door. We've got a Dangibi in the house. Welcome, Dangibi. Good to have you in the house. We've got Sister Adawa, aka Betty, in the house. Welcome. Great to have you in the house. We've got Sister Glenda in the house. Rise up. Great to have you here. Sister Karen, great to have you in the house. Wonderful. The family's coming through the door. Aviva Dasa, great to have you in the house as well. Brother Kwame says, Cambridge is a pro-white conservative college. Actually, I can put up, let's see. Cambridge is a pro-white conservative college that looks down upon non-whites, including Africans. These whites were so jealous that an African man was successful. And I think, family, you're going to be agreeing with the comments of Brother Kwame by the end of the show today, if you're not familiar with what has been happening. So welcome, welcome. Yes, thank you for reminding us, Brother Kwame, that it was Africans who built the UKKK, and this is how they racially ill-treat us. Yes, for those of you who've been following the series and the previous series, you will know. And for those of you who've got my book there, Hidden in the Shadows of Ancient Britain, an erased African history restored, you will know that we are the original and indigenous people of Britain. Okay. So thank you so much for your comments and for coming through the door. Glenda says nothing but pure racism yet to be debated. Yeah, we're going to have that conversation today. So we want to rise up the entire family. Thank you for rising me up as well. Brother Arday, yes, he was just 41 years young, a young Black professor at Cambridge University. And Brother Kwame says, Sister Shanice, just like our people who built as well and ran the Black Wall Street, exactly. They were so jealous. They bombed and murdered our people. Am I right, Mama Adawa? Yes, you are right indeed. Jealousy. There's so many examples of jealousy that unfortunately has led to us becoming victims of those who just hate to see the Black man or the Black woman rise. Rise up, Sister Karen, who says that she's listening to an audio book, The Delicable Negro by Vincent Woodard. It talks about the treatment of slaves. It's just horrible. Yes, and didn't they even used to eat us? Can you believe that? But yeah, that is history. It is the truth, you know. And our sister Adangbi says, I am wondering how many of Mr. Arday's personal claims and exploits, if you will, have been either debunked or confirmed. Well, we're going to be touching on some of that today as well. And by the end of today's presentations, I'm sure you're going to get a deeper insight and a clearer understanding of what's been going on. And so what I don't want to do is to delay starting today's presentation too long, because as always, there is a lot to get through. And so, yeah, let's go straight in to our conversation for today. So let me begin to share screen with you so that we can start today's discussion and conversation. Please do continue to put your comments in the comment section, and I will be visiting the comment section periodically. So I'm just going to go on to YouTube here on my phone just to check that I'm coming out and that you can see the presentation, and I'll also be able to see your comments from here as well. So if you're just coming through the door, welcome. We're just about to start the presentation for today, and just thanking you in advance for joining me on today's show. So I don't know how people find me on YouTube. I can't even find myself on my own channel right now. All sorts of things are popping up. Right, let me go to the live section and see where we are, because there's a lot that I want us to get through on the show today. But of course, I just need to make sure, that you are seeing the presentation. Okay, yes, you are. Fantastic. I can see the presentation is running. Okay, all righty. But I can also see, let me stop and take away that scrolling thing, because otherwise that's going to detract from otherwise that's going to detract from the presentation, and I don't want that to happen. All right, that one. Okay, all right, family, are we good to go? Yeah, certainly hope we are good to go. Let's go back into presenter's view. Right, so today we're going to be talking about the young Professor Jason Arday, who was who we tragically lost last Friday. And for those of you who are not familiar with the case, you certainly will be by the end of our conversation today. So we're going to be, having a conversation about the tragic passing. And this is a young man who had an extraordinary journey in his, and he was only 41 years old when he passed, but yeah, he had an extraordinary journey. This is a young man who inspired thousands of young people. And sadly, he's left behind a family, friends, colleagues, and members of the Black community, and even some members of the wider community who are being traumatized by the way that he was treated and are demanding answers. And in the show today, we're going to be examining some of the claims that were made about him. And also, I want to be highlighting some of the claims that were made by some of our prominent Black leaders here in the UK, who, expressed concern about the relentless scrutiny that this young man faced as a professor at Cambridge University. And we're going to be answering the difficult questions about the responsibility and the accountability of the UK press. And we're also going to be asking, whether this young man who was a professor was just being scrutinized, because obviously as a young professor you would expect maybe to be scrutinized, but was he under scrutiny or was he under persecution? For those of you who are familiar with this case, what are your thoughts? Was he under scrutiny or persecution? If there's one thing that we do know about this case, he was certainly hounded by the press. There were over 249 articles written about this young man within a 3-week period. And we're going to have to ask ourselves, where does legitimate journalism and media, where does legitimate journalism end? And then at what point does it become media persecution? Because the level of so-called scrutiny and criticism that this young man had to endure, nobody would want that amount of media scrutiny. And for those of us who was following this story, and to be honest, I only became aware of it last Thursday, the day before his tragic passing. For those of you who were following, you would have been seeing the level of hounding that he was under. And was the coverage justified? Was it proportionate? Or had it become something far more damaging? And were you concerned about the extent and the depth of the scrutiny and the criticism that this young man had to suffer? Or, what were your thoughts prior to this climax that happened on Friday? And have you noticed, if you've been following this, that there's been almost now a total media blackout on this story? Over 30,000 people attended a vigil that was held in his honor a couple of days ago, and there's been a deathly silence from the media about it. Some of Britain's most prominent newspapers who were at the forefront of putting the knife into this young professor, metaphorically speaking, have gone deathly quiet now and are not reporting the showering of love that has been poured out by the public about his treatment and his abuse following his death. So we're going to also be hearing what some of these prominent Black figures of ours had to say about it. And I'm glad that they came out. And what you're going to hear about what they had to say, family, I think you're going to find deeply troubling and disturbing. So I'm just preparing you for that. Yes, Brother Kwame, you know, the nasty racist comments, as well as laughing at Brother Arday's death. You're joking, they were laughing. You see, we've got some sick people in our community. Sister Adawa says, absolute persecution and wickedness. Wow. They were laughing and making derogatory remarks about our brother even after his passing. We've got some soulless beings that we're living amongst, and we need to remember that. Anyway, let me just remind you that this is the month of Messiah. Yes, it's the month of Marcus Messiah Garvey. It's the month of his Earth Day. It was his Earth Day on the 17th of this month. And so we call this the month of Messiah, and we celebrate him every day. And so I just want to remind you that, you know, in celebration of this month, remember to get your free copy of my tribute book to Marcus Messiah Garvey. All right, you can go to my Gumroad account and you can just search for tribute to Marcus Messiah Garvey, and you can download a copy free of charge. You can share it, because I want the works of Marcus Messiah Garvey to reach every young person so they can be inspired, so they can be uplifted, and they can be transformed by the vision of Marcus Messiah Garvey for our race. Okay, so get your free copy if you haven't already done so. If you want to leave a contribution, you can do so. If you don't, just put zero contribution. That's absolutely fine. I'd rather that you had the copy and that you were able to download it and read it to the children and have the conversations about the great works of Marcus Messiah Garvey. Okay, because we are the ones who are going to have to prepare our young people to be the resilient ones that they need to be in order to get through in this society today. Also, just to remind you that I am the author of a total of 6 books, and my most recent book is this one here, Hidden in the Shadows of Ancient Britain, an Erased African History Restored. And, you know, our young Professor Jason Arday, he was in what we would term the belly of the beast. And right there in Cambridge University, there is likely to be, you know, like a city underneath the university that's stacked high with our artifacts and hidden evidence of our former presence here in Britain. Do you think they're going to want to have a black man in that position with that knowledge and not worry that maybe one day he would present the evidence to his community? Well, just so that you know, we are already aware of the evidence that exists, that we have an ancient history here in Britain. And I have been uncovering the truth of our history that you won't be taught in the school, colleges, and universities. And I have put that evidence in the book. This is the sort of information that Cambridge University already knows about and would want to hide. Okay, so that's why then one of the reasons why they're not going to want a black professor at the helm of the university, because they don't want him to become exposed to the truth about our history, the truth and the evidence to inform him that we as Africans are the original indigenous people of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and that we arrived here over 45,000 years ago, that we were the ones who built Stonehenge, we were the ones who brought astronomy and mining and metallurgy and agriculture and animal husbandry to this country, that we were the ones who built those castles with the moats, we were the ones who brought civilization to the land. We were the ones who built the cities, the towns that developed the civilizations here. And we did that in the same way that we were building kingdoms and cities on the continent of Africa and ruling all over Africa, all over the Mediterranean region, and the entire Black planet prior to the reset. Okay, so get the knowledge, inform our children, because knowledge is power and we do need to be empowered, with the knowledge of who we are. And we need to have the resilience as well in order to go through, because there are extreme right wingers who are waiting for us like vampires, like vultures in these organizations, and they seem to believe that their job is to make our life absolute hell. So if you're just coming through the door, welcome back to the Sister Shanice Show platform. We're going to go through the case today of Professor Jason Arday, who was tragically unalived, taken from us last Thursday. And the man at the center of this row, who was the one claiming plagiarism against our professor, the one who was whipping up the media against the professor, his name is Nathan Kofnas. And this Nathan Kofnas was actually thrown out of Cambridge University for his extremist views. And so, as you can imagine, he's got a big chip on his shoulder. Imagine him being thrown out of Cambridge University, one of the most prestigious universities in Britain. And he's looked back and he's seen a young Black man as a professor at the university that he was thrown out of, that he probably believed that he had more of an entitlement to be at than our young Black professor. And so even though he was thrown out of this university for his extremist views on race, this scumbag of a man still managed to whip up a lynching campaign against Professor Jason. And this campaign was relentless. And it's interesting, isn't it, really, when you think about it, how it is or why it was that the press actually listened to this discredited man over and above a kind, gentle, loyal, serving university professor. But that's what they did. Now, according to this Observer article, it says the allegations against Jason Arday gained widespread attention after Nathan Kofnas, an academic who was dismissed by Cambridge's Emmanuel College in 2024 because of his views on race, were deemed to challenge the college's core values. This was posted in Substack, alleging parts of Arday's PhD were plagiarized. So he called Arday's appointment a DEI ideology and told the Times Radio that Arday was not smart enough to be a Cambridge professor. So as far as this man was concerned, he went on radio, Times Radio, and he was saying that, this professor's not smart enough to be a professor. He's only there because of these DEI, race equality ideology policies that's putting Black people in positions who don't deserve to be there. This is a disgraced former associate of that college. Now, Kofnas, he himself describes himself as a race realist. whose academic research focuses on the philosophy of biology and ethics. And in February 2024, he published a post on Substack in which he claimed that race is linked to intelligence and that without DEI initiatives, there would be no Black academics at Harvard, and that under a colorblind system, Black people would disappear from almost all high-profile positions outside of sport and entertainment. What a cheek. He called for a revolution against the DEI devil and for people to accept that talent is not distributed equally within or across groups. Now, let me go to my WhatsApp, because I did actually come across a post from Kwame Ossi, who may be joining us today. And this post was reminding us as a people of some of the inventions that we as Africans had actually, find Kwame, had invented. Yeah. And if we were uneducated, if we didn't have the ability as far as he was concerned, then why is it that we are the ones who are at the forefront of so many inventions? Oh no, it's not in here. It's going to be in my post. Hang on one moment, please, family. He's just reminding us that we are the ones that invented so much. The traffic lights, here we go. Is that it? Oh, did I not post it? Okay, doesn't look as though. Well, Brother Kwame Ossi, if you join us, please do post it in the chat. But basically, he was reminding us that we as Africans, we were the ones who invented the computer, we invented ChatGTP, we were the ones who made the computers go faster, we invented the traffic lights, we invented so many things. Oh my gosh. But as you can imagine, if we're the ones, the original indigenous people who brought civilization to the world, then you just need to think about, what it takes to civilize a society, and you will know that we are the ones that brought the educational institutions, the original founders of education. We set that up, the whole structures that we still continue with today, and that Cambridge University continues with today, the political system and the structures of parliament, etc. We are the ones who structured that. Metallurgy, astronomy, building houses, building walls, building cities, all the infrastructure that goes into building a city. We are the originators of all of that, and our people continue to be inventors, great inventors, up until today. Sorry, I haven't got that list to hand, because I really like the way that Brother Kwame just laid it out for us. And if I remember, I'll try and bring that next strong, since I don't have that with me right now today. Rise up, Sister Afrijamo. Good to see you in the house as well, watching us all the way from Ghana. Not sure to what extent you're aware of this particular case that we're talking about today, because you're in Ghana. But my sis, you're going to find out a lot about what Cambridge University, in collaboration with the mainstream newspapers, have been up to make life absolute hell for a young Black professor who was at Cambridge University. Anyway, this man, Nathan Kofnas, who is at the center of claiming that Professor Arday plagiarized his PhD and all sorts of other claims, that he's not intelligent enough to be a professor, that he's not smart, that he shouldn't be at the university, and it's only because of these DEI devil, he calls it, policies, why people like us get to have senior positions within organizations, following all of this really extreme right-wing views that he held while he was at the university. There was a petition that students actually organized and academics organized, calling for his dismissal. And that petition gained more than 1,200 signatures And there were also protests against him at the Emmanuel College at University of Cambridge, and 58 students launched formal complaints against him. Also, one of our brothers, Kehinde Andrews, Professor Kehinde Andrews, who is a Black British academic, author, and activist, who became one of the UK's first professor of Black studies, said that many academics are accused of plagiarism. But why was it? Why did this accusation become such a story? And he said, it is because people like Kofnas simply don't believe that Black people deserve to be professors at all. They don't think they're capable. That's the end of his quote there. So that is the mindset of people like Nathan, who we have to put up with in the workplace. And we've got to be ready and we've got to be prepared for people like him in the workplace. And we have got to be part of support groups and networks to ensure that when we come up against people like Nathan Kofnas, that support network is there to carry us through. And it's not simply about absorbing all of the crap that they throw at us. It's throwing the crap back and learning how to throw that crap back so that they back off. So our poor young Professor Jason Arday, he must have felt like he was being hounded. He was being hounded. But our history tells us, you know, that this is nothing new. You know, if you go back to during our enslavement and our fight for emancipation, there are so many stories about how the enslaved Africans who were attempting to escape the bondage that they were in were frequently tracked down and terrorized by these specialized packs of bloodhounds or so-called Negro dogs. Isn't that what's happening right now? Where, you know, we as a people, we're attempting, you know, to integrate within their systems and work within their workplace, and we're still held as bondage, really. And if they feel that we've overstepped our status, then what they do is they track us down, they terrorize us. They have their specialist packs. Today, the specialist packs are called the right wingers, and they come after us with their press like bloodhounds, just as they did back in the days, just as the planters and the professional so-called slave catchers did back in the day. They tracked down us as Africans for attempting to run away from the brutality of the plantations. There are so many historical records and narratives that document these numerous violent pursuits involving these animals. And today, the animals are the newspapers, and the specialized packs, you know, are the right wingers. And we are still their victims. Let me go to the book and read, give you an example here, because as I said, we've been reading through the book To Hell or Barbados, the ethnic cleansing of Ireland. And I'm going to go to page 58. I'm just going to read a little bit from the book there. And it says, a man named Charles Kavanagh, who owned 1,400 acres of the county of Carlow, did retain his lands in return for destroying Tories in that county and in the adjoining counties of Wicklow, Wexford, and Kilkenny. Now, you'll have to go back to the earlier episodes, I think about episode 2 or 3, to, you know, to get the details and the context of this particular story. But I'll come into the bit that I want to highlight. Many in other counties also managed to retain their lands by hunting down and killing or capturing Tories. Listen to this. Hunts were organized with dogs, half mastiff and half bloodhounds, specifically imported from England to track down the Tories. These were the black Tories. Meets were arranged at designated places as foxhounds meets are held today. They were accompanied by the recreant Irish servants who preceded them. Once a quarry was sighted, the hounds were loosed and bound forward, bringing down their prey. Isn't that what's not? I mean, this was happening to us during the mid 17th century when we were being hunted down in Ireland and being captured, and then eventually, after being put in the jails as prisoners of war, were put on those slave ships and sent to the Caribbean or the Americas. And here we have a situation where it's talking about the hunts, and this is how it feels, and this is how it must have felt for Professor Jason Arday, who was hunted, in the workplace. And he must have felt as though there were these dogs, mastiffs, and bloodhounds who were after him, and these were the Daily Telegraph, the Sunday Times, the Guardian, even Daily Mail, the Sun, just to name a few. Yeah, and if I go to page 165, because we're still in the series, if I go over to page 165 of the book, listen to this. It's talking about I'm reading. Another planter charged with beating his servant to death was acquitted by the court. And, earlier today I was being reminded of the case of, his name just gone out of my head. It was just there a second ago and it's just gone out of my head. The one who they claim stabbed himself, and he was the singer of that song, Police Officer. Give me a producer. Somebody drop his name in the chat for me, please. Who I'm trying to remember. 1 minute he was fine, but he was left there with the police in his home. The next minute he was dead. Smiley culture. That's it. Smiley culture, and this isn't anything new. So back then, the planters, they would commit these atrocities and then be acquitted by the court, and so they wouldn't be charged, or if they were charged, they would be acquitted. And in this particular situation, it says that they were acquitted by the court because there had been provocation on the servant's part. So it just needed to be claimed that there was provocations. Masters were allowed to flog both female and male servants until the blood flowed. In a case of disobedience, they were permitted to severely whip the offender and then nail him by the ears to a pillory. Runaway servants were treated with extreme harshness. A law in Maryland, passed in 1639, stated that a servant convicted of running away was to be publicly executed. And I really feel that the right wingers feel that to become a professor is us running away with ourselves, us running above our status, the status that they have for us. They want to see us under their feet, and they want to keep us under their feet. And if we rise to become the professors, then as far as they're concerned, we're a runaway, and we're not supposed to occupy those positions. And so what do? They start flogging us. Yeah, and they flog us until the blood flows, just in the way that this young man was being flogged by the press until his blood flowed. In a case of disobedience, they were permitted to severely whip the offender, as I said, and nail him by the ears to a pillory. And it's like all you're hearing in your ears, like back then. You know, you're just getting the pain from hearing the radio talking about you, the newspapers talking about you, people talking about you. You know, it's like you're nailing your ear to the pillory. Runaway servants were treated with extreme harshness. Now, this is how, you know, some people who rise in a society feel that they're being treated. Look how they treated Diane Abbott. Look how Diane Abbott was treated for years with extreme harshness. And I mentioned that there was a law that was passed in 1639, stated that a servant convicted of running away was to be publicly executed. Now, isn't that what we've just witnessed? A public media execution? Wow, wow, wow. A law passed in Virginia in 1642 declared that a servant who ran away for the second time was to be soundly flogged and branded on the cheeks or shoulder with the letter R. Wow, family. Back then, we were being physically flogged, physically branded. And now, you know, I'm using it as a metaphor for the hell that some of our people go through when the press turn into the hounds that hound you, you know, with an insatiable appetite to want to rip you apart. Now, despite the penalties, servants still ran away. And isn't that what's happening today? Despite the challenges that some of our people are going to face in these institutions, you know, they're still getting their master's, PhD degrees, and they're still occupying high positions within the various institutions, organizations, but they are catching hell. Some of them are catching hell within those institutions. Despite the penalties, servants still ran away. They left the plantations late at night, stealing food and clothing to help them on their way. They traveled at night, hiding out in bush or forest during the day, and swimming rivers to throw off the pursuit of hunters with dogs. Now, young Professor Jason, he eventually resigned from his job, and he had hoped that by resigning, it would throw off the hounds, that they would leave him alone. But no, they still pursued him. They still pursued him. The wicked, wicked British press still pursued him, even after he had resigned, just as though they used to pursue us. Even after we run away from those plantations, they pursued us with dogs, and they would have the dogs rip us apart if we were caught. And that is why, you know, back then many would fight to the death rather than be caught, preferring death to the flogging and the other barbarities that would ensue if they were captured. And if the autopsy turns out that this young man did indeed take his life, then it's a situation where sadly he preferred death to the continuous flogging, to the lynching from the hound dogs that were pursuing him. He preferred death and the peace that has now come with his death from the media rather than the continuous hounding. This family is a reminder of the injustices that we as Black people have suffered, and that today the fight continues. Okay, it's a new fight, but it's part of an ongoing fight that we have been fighting for centuries. Today's bloodhounds are the newspapers who track down and catch us as African, as Black people, who get above our status. Newspapers like the Telegraph, Daily Telegraph, the Times, the Sunday Times, the Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Sun, the BBC News, Sky News, the Independent, ITV, Channel 4 News, the Daily Mirror, the Daily Express, GB News, Financial Times, all of them were hounding young Professor Jason Arday. And what stands out most in this tragic, tragic case that we're discussing today is that the allegations were not confined just to one hostile newspaper, but that it became a genuinely national media story. All the newspapers I mentioned all ran with this allegation of plagiarism, and beyond that, they then went into questioning, his background. They went into his childhood. He was suffering with autism. They went into that. They went into his nonverbal history. They questioned his athletic accomplishments, the charitable work that he said he did. They were questioning that. They were publishing all sorts of claims about him, personal claims, that went into abuse. And they were even, when he did resign, they were even questioning whether or not he wrote his own resignation letter. They didn't let up, family. They didn't let up. And, these newspapers, many of them were actually running with articles about him on their front page. On the 6th of August, the Guardian's roundup of that day's national front page is recorded. Yeah, the Guardian with the headline, "Academic Resigns Amid Plagiarism Accusations." Telegraph, "Cambridge Professor Quits After False Claims." The Times, "Plagiarism Row Professor Resigns from Cambridge." Daily Mail, "Plagiarism Professor Resigns as Cambridge investigates." That is 4 national newspapers simultaneously placing the controversy on their front pages. On their front pages, some newspapers, for example, the Telegraph and the Sun, they had commentary that was going into personal claims. The Sun's description of Professor Arday was that he was a smiling assassin. While they were assassinating him through their newspaper articles, they were calling him the smiling assassin. And all of this went way beyond this allegation of plagiarism. And a data investigation that actually counted the number of articles across these 15 national outlets in the 22 days before his death was unusually intense. Multiple outlet national stories with repeated investigations, commentaries on follow-up and front page treatment. This was unbearable for the young man. And the legitimate question is not whether Professor Jason Arday should have been scrutinized. It's, as I said, he's in that public position. So, you have to be accountable. And so you have to be open to scrutiny. All academics, have to be open to scrutiny. But the big question here is the proportionality. How did just mere allegations concerning, this one professor supposedly plagiarizing some of his PhD escalate into a national investigation that was carried by virtually every national newspaper that then went into all aspects of this man's life? Family, this treatment of the press was wicked, and this is an example of the press being weaponized to assassinate the character of an individual, leaving that individual feeling hounded, feeling isolated, feeling powerless, feeling that they're fighting an enemy whose voice is louder than your own. And it's the scumbags of the likes of this one here, yeah, who had the contacts in the media, who was driving the hunt, tormenting the young professor, that ultimately took him out. Evil was at work, family, evil. And this young man felt hounded by these hounds, the press, the media, who've now gone silent. Wow. I want to rise up some of our leading Black professionals in the society today. We've got Baron Lord Simon Woolley of Woodford, and he, alongside Diane Abbott, Dawn Butler, and others, actually spoke at the vigil that was held in Trafalgar Square, that was attended by over 30,000 people who turned out, you know, in sympathy and in support of young Jason Arday, who is no longer with us. And if I haven't already said so, I'm sure I have. I want to send out my sympathies to his family, to his loved ones, to his friends, who were all immediately touched by his passing. And of course, you know, so many members of our community has been traumatized by this awful, wicked treatment that he endured, and have been traumatized by the outcome, which is, you know, him being found unresponsive in his apartment back on Friday of last strong. Lord Simon Woolley of Woodford recalled meeting Jason shortly before his death, alongside Diane Abbott, Professor Diane Abbott MP, Professor Kahindi Andrews, and others. And according to Lord Woolley, Jason had become so fearful and distressed that they needed to make arrangements for him to travel discreetly to meet them at a restaurant, and for him to enter that restaurant by the back door. I mean, and for me, it just goes back centuries to when, you know, we were on the plantation and we wanted to run away. We'd have to, you know, leave discreetly at night. We couldn't be seen. We had to be hiding. And here's Jason feeling a prisoner in his house, not wanting to leave his house because the hounds, you know, were at his door. And Lord Woolley records, he said, holding him and there as a group, holding him and reassuring him that he was loved, and they promised him that they would find financial support to back his case, and they would get him professional help, and that, you know, there was a way forward. But most hauntingly, he said he recalled Jason telling him that he felt he was being hounded and could not see a way out. Wow. Lord Woolley described what happened to Jason as a public assassination and a lynching. And these are powerful words for a lord to actually use. And, you know, these are the words that he used after reflecting on the relentless public and media scrutiny that Jason had endured. And, you know, when he spoke at Trafalgar Square, he was reminding us of when Jason, the young man, walked into his office. I think he said he was about 15 years old at the time. And he said, "Brother Woolley, I want to change the world." He said, I want to do good. I want to inspire people. And against all odds, he said he did manage to make a change. He did manage to do good. He did manage to inspire so many students. But wow, look at the cost. Look at what it cost him. But according to those, he said, who gathered to remember him, something happened to him after he reached the highest levels of British academia. Of course, it attracted the jealousy of one particular individual, one disgraced individual who was kicked out of the university for his extremist views. This Nathan Cuffesper, he came back to haunt Jason. Wow. MP Diane Abbott, she spoke as well. She told the crowd that this was not simply about the events of the final few weeks of his life. She alleged that Jason had endured a sustained and bitter campaign during his 3 years at Cambridge University. So this young man had been suffering for 3 years. For 3 years, he'd been enduring a sustained and bitter campaign at Cambridge University. Where were, the HR staff at Cambridge University? Where was the support that he should have been getting at Cambridge University? Of course, they can make all sorts of claims now, but, clearly that wasn't the case, that our young man felt that he was being supported. And, she was also questioning whether he was being, academically attacked or whether it was because of the position that he held. And she drew attention to the extraordinary intensity of the media coverage during his final weeks and asked whether Jason believed that resigning would finally bring the attacks to an end. Wow, wow, wow. And only for the scrutiny, she said, for it to intensify. Wow. So during the final weeks, when he decided that he was going to resign, she believes that he would have thought that resigning would finally bring the attacks to an end, but it didn't. The scrutiny, the criticism, the hounding intensified. They were claiming, trying to suggest, yes, that's why he's resigned, because he's guilty. Dawn Butler, she also spoke, and she said that, she tries to take the conversation somewhere a little bit differently, but equally importantly. And, she apologized to Jason's family, first of all, that she said we couldn't protect him. But she also issued a challenge. She argued that recognizing racism cannot simply mean describing it after somebody has suffered. Anti-racism has to be active, she said, and she was calling for unity. She was calling for transparency, fairness, and sustainable charges. And she reminded everybody that was gathered in Trafalgar Square, all 30,000 people, she said that we should not simply become, this should not simply become a battle of black against white. It must be about right against wrong, justice against injustice, racism against anti-racism. And she said that being an anti-racist isn't enough to just say I'm an anti-racist. You've got to actively be doing something against racism to be an anti-racist. So I'll rise up, Dawn Butler MP, for her words there. There was also MP Belle Ribeiro Addy, who spoke, and she at the end shared a heartfelt message from the family, in which that message stated that, and I quote, "This has been an incredibly painful time for our family, and we are still trying to come to terms with the tragic loss of our beloved Jason. Above all, their wish for Jason is for him to be remembered for the wonderful person that he was and for all that he had achieved. They described him as a selfless, gentle soul who tirelessly uplifted others through his words and actions. Wow. Rise up, Professor Jason Arday. And the crowd also heard from Joe McComb, KC, who's the founder and director of the Good Law Project. And he said that he's going to try and make good on the profound trust shown to me by the Black people behind the stage who have trusted me, he said, enough to come to this platform on this day to speak to you. And he promised to do what he could to try and repay that trust. I want to let you hear for yourself what he said. But before I do, let me turn to the chat. And I wonder if, you saw anything wrong with that comment, because I did. I'll tell you what I saw wrong with that comment in just a short while. Rise Up Brother Kwame says, Mama Dawn is right. We must be actively anti-racist. Big up also to Sister Belle Rivero Ade. Rise up. Cambridge knew what they did and they are lying about it. Betty has said that, Sister Adawa has said the university wanted him gone. Then why not just, dismiss him, or, why allow him to be torn to pieces like that? Why? Somebody tell me. Why not just sack him? Why not just dismiss him? Why not, why allow him to be torn to pieces like that? They must have seen the trauma that it was causing him. Brother Kwame says, Mama Frances Cress Wilson covered 9 areas where whites practice their white supremacy system against non-whites, from economics to war. There are other parts, such as health to sport. Rise up for that, and for reminding us of the works of Mama Frances Cress Wilson. These demons hounded Brother Arday and they lynched him. Yes, indeed. Sister Glenda says, we'll just cuss 2 bad word and get them. Sometimes it's good to do that because you can just get it out of your system. Yeah, cuss 2 bad word. Let them put you upon paid leave, and go and do what they want to do. Sometimes somehow we too soft with them, and you can't soft with them. Because when you soft with them take more liberties. Big up yourself, Sister Glenda. Done here, what you say. Or if it's not Sister Glenda, it might be Glenn. Yeah, Glenda True. Rise up, family there. Mama Shola as well. Big up to her. Love Mama Shola every time. She's always on the side of truth, on the side of justice, on the side of integrity. Big up Mama Shola, definitely. And Dawn Butler, big up to her too. So enough big ups coming from Brother Kwame, who also says the propaganda media warfare is about ruining lives to make a profit. Satan's. Yes, indeed. Imagine this was selling papers at the expense of, the way that it was affecting this young man who, it said, had autism, didn't speak until he was about 11 years old, and people, I was talking to Dr. Abu earlier, and he was saying to me that, he works with young people with autism, and they are very special individuals. They're kind, they're loving, they're giving, and he said they would never take their life because they value life too much. They're gifted. They have their gifts, they are gifted, and they're special. And to hurt somebody, it's not in their thinking. And to hurt themselves and take their own life, it's not in their thinking either. And that's so we have to wait for the autopsy on this one, family. Yes, Sister Betty, pure jealousy and hate. absolutely agree with you on that as well. Yes, Adangbi says, I think he was on the autism spectrum. He was, at least from my observation. Yes, he was indeed. Let's go back down to the end. Sister Nina, we have every right to express our anger, including swearing. Brother Kwame Osei, rise up. I called your name earlier. I was trying to find your Facebook post with the list of some of our inventions because, you know, I was quoting from this racist who was trying to claim that, you know, we were unintelligent and didn't deserve to be professors in top universities. And if it wasn't for the DEI, you know, we wouldn't be there. And you, in your Facebook post, was reminding us of all of, well, not all of, some of our inventions and our creators as creators. And here you say, if we were united and mobilized, this would not have happened because Cambridge University would have to be accountable to the African community. That is so true. So, so true, my brother. Let me let you hear what I heard this man say, and I don't know, people didn't seem to pick up on it in the way that I've picked up on it, but you know, that's just me being me. Let me
that a white person stands on this stage and acknowledges it, and fixing that.
Thank you. Love you.
Humanity and love. Fixing that is many, many generations' work.
Thank you.
But my promise to you is this: no other industry in the country, in the world, is allowed to monetize human pain and suffering. No other industry is allowed to profit from those things without being regulated. And nor should our increasingly revolting press. And Good Law Project will fight as hard as we can. And we will put Andy Burnham under as much political pressure as we can. With your help, to change that appalling state of affairs that has killed another person, Professor Jason Arday. And we will fight, and I will try and make good on the profound trust shown to me by the black people behind this stage who have trusted me enough to come onto this platform on this day.
Okay, so who are the black people behind the stage that he's just talked about there? You know, so he's saying all these wonderful things about what he's promising to do, you know, and he's going to try and make good his promise to these black people behind the stage. You know who these black people behind the stage were that he was referring to? Baron Lord Simon Woolley of Woodford, MP Diane Abbott, MP Dawn Butler, MP Bell Ribeiro Ade, among other distinguished Black African individuals from our community. Was that a slip of the mouth? These black people back there, these black people back there, those black people back there who are lords and MPs better realize if they didn't, and we all better realize if we didn't, that it doesn't matter how high you climb, they still see you as black people behind there. Aye. Now, you might say I've got it all wrong, you know, but that's what I heard. How could you stand up there on the stage? Yeah, imagine me standing up on the stage and I've been appointed to do a job and I'm like, I'm going to do the best I can in the job that you have invested in me for all these white people out there. Aye, you just wouldn't. And who are these white people? The Prime Minister, Lords, and MPs. For those white people behind me there. Really? Really? Wow, wow, wow. Now, all this money that's being raised to support the case is going to go to this good law project, right back into the hands of the same people whose people are oppressing us. I mean, I think that money should go into the hands of Black lawyers. Surely I know we have Black lawyers who are capable, but how are our Black leaders making us look to the white world when we have to turn to them for help? Like we can't help ourselves, and what confidence would young Professor Jason have had, if we're saying to him, yeah, we're going to go to the same people who are oppressing us to help us. There comes a time when we know we've got to stand up on our hind legs, and we've got to do the boxing, and we've got to do the fighting, and we've got to bring other sections of our community on board to join the fight. Hear what a man say. Him a go try do him can do for these Black people behind there. Lord Simon Woolley, MP Diana, MPs he's talking about. My gosh, tell me what you think about that comment. In the meantime, rise up, Brother Kwame. He's put in the chat what I was asking for. Let me see. I just saw it here a moment ago. Where's it gone? Okay, maybe it's further back up. It was here a minute ago, and I just went to refer to it, and it's gone. Okay, I'm sure it'll pop back up again. Let me scroll down. Yes, here it is. So Kwame Osei was reminding the racists of some of our inventions, because this particular racist, this right-wing extremist, it was claiming that we don't have the intelligence. Well, if we didn't have the intelligence, why is it and how is it that it was our people that invented the GPS, the mobile phone, the internet, the refrigeration trucks, the actual phone, wasn't invented by Bellator, but by Louis Latimer, laser eye technology, Patricia Bath, home security system, the layout and design of Washington, D.C., the first PC of IBM, of IBM. Mark Dean was the inventor for that, and the list goes on. Right, like Brother Kwame Oboje, who says both Mama Diane, Mama Dawn, and Sister Bell, but their Labour Party aren't our friends. True talk. And Glenda says racism is not what you think it is. In other words, racism is a profound phenomenon analogous to all conspiracy theory against Black people classified as Black. Yes, and we as Africans, even if we classify ourselves as Africans, we are still at the receiving end of racism. No matter what we call ourselves, we could call ourselves Muslims, Christians, Labour Party members, Conservative members, professors, whatever we call ourselves, we are going to be at the receiving end of racism, because they see us, by our race and our color. Rise up, Iola in the house. Seeing Charles says, out of the fullness of the heart speaks. He said what he meant. Tell me if I'm the only one who thinks it's a bit of a cheek and probably a slip of the tongue of this man to refer to lords and MPs as those Black people behind this stage. Brother Kwame says, Sister Glenda, you're right. Racism isn't just from the mouth, but systemically warfare. Yes, it is. Our sister Adangbi says, for Black folks, there is never any need or desire to know and remember them individually. Betty says, that man is disgusting. Kwame said, he's no better. Devil is a devil. And these are the devils that we're entertaining. And thousands is going to be raised in the name of this young man. And instead of it being put into building, a Black law firm that can fight these sorts of cases, Yeah, we're giving it straight back to the devils themselves, who refer to us, irrespective of our position in society, as those black ones behind the stage. What a thing. Yeah, we never learn. You're right, Brother Kwame. We never learn. So, no matter how high we as Africans or Black people or Christians or Muslims or whatever we want to call ourselves, no matter how high we climb in this society, you better know that you will still be seen and you will still be judged by the color of your skin, and you will be treated accordingly. So set up yourself. Join the Black workers groups, join the anti-racist groups, join, Pan-African groups, join organizations that are organizing against racism, against the right wingers within this society. Join the trade union, create a Black section in the trade union if there isn't already one. Yeah, defend yourself. We're gonna have to fight as a people. We can't just be lambs to the slaughter or blood for the hound dogs. Yeah, the treatment that we get is disproportionate. Why do I say that? Check this out, family. I'm going to highlight a couple of misconduct cases that have happened at Cambridge University, and I'm going to compare the treatment of some of these individuals who are either disciplined or face serious misconduct charges, and compare, the media response to that of Professor Jason Arday. And if you've never heard of a case of disciplinary action against a white professor at Cambridge University, you can be forgiven, yeah? Because you would think there has never been one. The way the press and the media hounded this young man over these plagiarism allegations, yeah? Allegations that weren't even substantiated, allegations that he was exonerated of, allegations that the university who oversaw his PhD said that, he had not committed an offense, so he'd been exonerated of the claim, but still they didn't let up. You would think that something like that has never happened before at Cambridge University, and that a professor had never at the university been accused of plagiarism. Because the way that Brother Professor Jason Arday was treated by the media and the coverage that he received, in my opinion, is unprecedented and way over this top. So at this juncture, let's go beyond, the case of Professor Jason and look at some of the other cases, a couple of other cases. And I think there's some questions that we're going to be left wanting answered, because I think you're going to see that there has been some differential treatment. I think you're going to see that, there have been different forms of misconduct cases at Cambridge University. And have they received the level of public profile scrutiny and criticism that Professor Arday received? Let's take a look. Okay. So we're not just going, these are just like for case study purposes. And one is very similar. Others, some might say, incidences were far worse. Let me know what you think. But this is just really for us to take a look at and to compare, the sort of reporting about the conduct of professors at Cambridge universities who have been had cases of misconduct brought against them. So the first one we're going to look at is that of Dr. William O'Reilly. He's a Cambridge associate. And he went through the Cambridge University's disciplinary process and had a case of plagiarism actually upheld against him. His case was upheld against him, not like the black professor, not like the African professor from Ghana, whose case wasn't upheld, whose case, charges he was exonerated of. In the case of Dr. William O'Reilly, the disciplinary hearing upheld the claim of plagiarizing against him because they found that what he had done was that he had taken work from an undergraduate student's essay, and they found that he used that essay in his PhD, and they found him guilty of plagiarism. But hear what they said. They said that it was a product of negligent act rather than deliberate conduct. How can you negligently take out chunks of work from an undergraduate student's essay, put it in your own PhD, and it not be a deliberate act? They called it a negligent act rather than deliberate conduct, and he remained in his post. And let's have a look at the national press coverage. Well, firstly, when we did this census analysis, we found that there was only a specialist student newspaper that had initially reported the case, and then the Telegraph actually reported it in 2023. Remember, look how many, we're talking about 55 different news outlets that was reporting on our young brother. In terms of the prominence, it was straightforward institutional reporting, and there was no national campaign. There was no interrogating his childhood. There was no slandering of his personality. There was no knocking his personal achievements, his health, or his family. None of that, despite this case being upheld against him. Now let's compare that with Professor Arday. And remember, there were 249 national articles that were written about Professor Arday in 22 days, although his plagiarism allegation, as I said, hadn't been upheld. It had not been upheld. Yet there were 249 national articles that was written against him within 22 days. Then there was this Professor Simon Goldhill. He was a Cambridge professor of Greek literature and culture. And there was an external investigation into his conduct at Cambridge, and it was upheld that there were at least 4 breaches of sexual and professional conduct rules that this man had breached. And this sexual misconduct actually arose from unwanted physical contact with a female student. There are strict policy, rules, guidelines about teachers not abusing their position with students and not to overstep that line. But he did. And here I quote, his touchy-feely behavior had long been an open secret within both the Faculty of Classics and King's College itself. That means that this did go a long time. This man a touchy-feely young children, young students from a long time. He later resigned while the disciplinary tribunal was considering sanctions. So, was there 249 articles written about this? Let's have a look. In terms of the national press coverage, at least 3 substantial papers covered the story. The original upheld findings, the allegations by the 2 women, and his resignation. and a couple of other specialist local papers covered the story. In terms of the prominence and the language and how they talked about this man, the headlines were quite serious because it was a very serious incident. So one headline said, world-leading classicist gave female student unwanted slobbery kiss. You know, isn't that trivializing what probably happened? 2 more women allege harassment. They don't say what that harassment was, though, do they? And another headline said, and world-leading classicist resigns after sexual misconduct investigation. So just 3 headlines. Compare that again with the media coverage that concentrated on allegations of misconduct, claims for an investigation, and the professionalism of Professor Arday. Wow. What this Simon Goldhill did should have got all the national newspapers talking about it. Did they tear into his life? Did they tear into previous investigations, previous complaints about Goldhill? Well, there was nothing to be found in any of the newspapers that suggested that was the case. Now let's have a look at Professor Herbert Huppert, Emeritus Professor of Geophysics at Cambridge and King's. He was removed from his fellowship following investigations that were upheld against him. And these complaints involved harassment, inappropriate touching, and sexualized remarks, and other unacceptable conduct. And Cambridge had previously imposed access restrictions concerning his conduct. So they knew about his conduct. They were concerned about his conduct. So they imposed restrictions. And obviously he breached those restrictions, which ultimately led to his removal. Look at how he was given and allowed to access to repeat his touchy, sexualized behavior. Wow. This Professor Herbert was among some fellows, and he was nicknamed Humpert after the central character in Vladimir Nabokov's novel. This was because he was often unduly attentive to younger female undergraduates. Concerns about his conduct had circulated within academia for years and were widely known, well before any formal action was eventually taken. Another case where sexual misconduct had been allowed to prevail for years before action was taken. Wow. Now, for avoidance of doubt, there's no suggestion how far he'd actually gone in terms of illegality, but it was troubling enough for them eventually to remove him from his job. And, you know, in this case, once again, we have a situation where there's the culture of secrecy that existed within Cambridge University about the bullying and harassment and the sexual misconduct of someone in a position of seniority. But did they, feed the press with the sort of frenzy that something like this deserved? We'll look at that in a second. But what they did do is they imposed some restrictions, restricting him access to some of these young students eventually after some of the allegations about his behavior. But despite that, Cambridge subsequently had to remove him because there were further complaints from female, even staff members, about harassment from this man. Wow. Let's have a look at the press coverage. Only at least two dedicated National Times reports, plus later discussions in a Times interview concerning misconduct and the culture of this secrecy and misconduct at King's. Headlines focused on the misconduct and institutional response. So, for example, King's College, Cambridge professor excluded over sexual harassment claims, right? And Royal Society honoured professor accused of sexual misconduct. There wasn't the hounding, there wasn't the digging into his personal life, into previous allegations, how long it had been going on for, nothing like that. Nothing that resembled the sort of treatment that Professor Arday had to endure, which was at the scale of about 20 plus articles a day, going into his private life, his history, his achievements, his biography, everything. This young man suffered. He really suffered. And I suppose we need to make this important distinction between the case of Jason Arday and the others, that they are examples, but they are good examples of how the media engaged in an accelerated campaign against Professor Arday and just hardly dealt with more serious cases coming out of Cambridge University. And if we remember, in the case of Jason, the allegation hadn't even been upheld. Liverpool University did not uphold the allegation that was being made against him. They said, if anything, there might have been honest and reasonable error, but nothing that deserved the outrage, the scrutiny, and the claims that were being made by the newspapers. But they persisted and persisted. But if you look at like for like, in terms of, doing a bit of a comparison here with the other university disciplinary case, where in this case, William O'Reilly had been charged with plagiarism, it's almost a like for like case. And when you look at the two cases of plagiarism, and in 2018, O'Reilly actually published a journal article incorporating substantial material originating in the essays written by one of his undergraduate students. And it was following a complaint and Cambridge's proceedings, and then the conduct and the adjudication that the plagiarism, it said, arose from neglect rather than acts of deliberate plagiarism. My gosh. And he remained in his job. Basically, he got away with it. Yeah. But then when we look at how our young man was treated, yeah, on the basis of a claim that he was exonerated from, you can see that these national newspapers had devoted themselves to hounding this young man. Wow. And they just carried on with their stories. Wicked, evil hounding of this young man. And when you look at the headlines between what the newspapers were saying about this O'Reilly and compare that to the plagiarism claims against Arday, again, Arday was labeled. He was torn apart. And whereas for this man, it was just a light touch, slap on the hand. Wow. And it's being claimed that we need to, that we're not the originators of our work when we have people like O'Reilly taking large chunks of undergraduate students' work and putting it in his PhD, not thinking that he's going to be caught. My. And then when he is caught, it was like, oh, it's just a little oversight. It's nothing serious, nothing to worry about. He can still keep his job. Wow. And, because this is Garvey month as well, I just want us to, again, remember the works of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his organization and his accomplishments through the Universal Negro Improvement Association. You can go to last Strong's episode to get more details about Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his achievements. And this is a man who achieved all of this without help from the government and with an 8th grade education. An 8th grade education. He didn't study up to becoming a professor. Yeah. With an 8th grade education, he built factories, he built hotel, chain of groceries, and so much more. And let's not forget that the white mainstream press of the 1920s generally depicted Marcus Garvey so negatively as a dangerous demigod or a comic opera promoter. They were fixated on his elaborate uniforms. They, were expressing concerns about his royal titles. They spotlighted the financial failures within the organizations, and their major publications was frequently sensationalizing and framing to mock Marcus Mosiah Garvey. They were mocking his Pan-African ambitions and expressing alarm at his suggestions or his ideals of racial separation. But he continued to achieve, he continued to grow. This is an organization that had at one point over about 20 million of members, chapters all over the world. But the reporting about Marcus Mosiah Garvey from the national newspapers, like that of Professor Arday, was relentless. And he'd sacrificed so much for his people. And it was in May 1940 that the dagger went in. Sadly, a prominent African-American newspaper, the Chicago Defender, published a premature obituary for Marcus Garvey while he was still alive. He'd heard a rumor that he had passed, and before checking it, he went and broke the news in the newspaper. And this story was carried by a British newspaper as well, and they delivered some harsh, premature, critical comments about Marcus Garvey, describing him as broke, unpopular, and forgotten. And it was when Marcus Garvey read these accounts that it's believed to have triggered the severe stroke that eventually led to his death. The press, again, involved. But what they forget to tell you about Marcus Mosiah Garvey and, the Black Star Liner and the failing of the Black Star Liner is that the American government had actually contributed to the collapse of the UNIA Black Star Liner. And they did that through covert surveillance, by targeting undercover agents to infiltrate the Black Star Line and the organization. And, they politicized this idea of this federal mail fraud, which they used as a grounds to prosecute him and to jail him. And yes, there were some financial mismanagement and failings within the organization, but how many organizations are there out there right now who are wasting government funds, failing miserable to manage our funds properly? But do the press come down on them and tear them apart? No, they don't. But they used the financial weaknesses within his organizations to actively basically run a campaign against him, to stain the image of the organization and then to actively dismantle it. They couldn't stomach the huge success of an African man. And it was J. Edgar Hoover's campaign, as a young Edgar Hoover back in the day as well, to target Marcus Garvey and to claim that he was a dangerous foreign agitator who threatened the racial status quo. What's the racial status quo? That Black people are supposed to know their place. They had undercover agents operating within the UNIA, monitoring the financing, gaining intel records, and then using that information as a pretext to dismantle the organization. There's so much more that could be said about that, but for time, I'll leave it. And we also had that really awful image that they created of Malcolm X as well. It was Malcolm equaling violence. Another important example of how the media, didn't merely just report on the great works that Malcolm X was doing, but they used the media to construct a public image of him that millions of Americans then had of him. And, they presented him in the mainstream media as someone who was angry, dangerous, extremist, separatist, and an advocate of racial hatred and violence. But, what was he angry about? He was, did he have a right to be angry? Because he was talking about Black people being beaten by the police. He was talking about Black people being attacked in the streets, about Black families living under segregation and impoverishment, about Black people being terrorized while the law frequently failed to protect them. He was talking about Black people swinging from trees. We know what that's about. He was talking about Black people being denied decent housing, employment, and political power. Yet somehow the man who was describing the violence and the injustices that we as Africans were experiencing was portrayed as the violent man, not the ones who were perpetrating the violence. So let's think about that, the power of the media to make the oppressed the victims. Family. Today, we're looking back in history from the days of the bloodhounds that would come after us on the plantations, and those bloodhounds that still come after us today, but in the form of the media. And we're remembering Professor Jason Arday, and our sympathies goes out to the family. Again, our sympathies goes out to all his close associates. And, as MP Bell read a statement at that vigil that was attended by 30,000 people. It was a statement from his family, and in it, it said, above all, we wish for Jason to be remembered for the wonderful person he was and all that he had achieved. A selfless and gentle soul, he tirelessly uplifted others through his words and actions. His achievements were great, and we do not want misrepresentations of his character to overshadow them. That's what they had to say. And I say, let's get the justice that Professor Jason Arday deserves so that he can be exonerated from all of the allegations made against him, so that he can be remembered for the great man he was, and also so he can rest in eternal peace. So, family, there's just so much that's happening in our community on a daily basis. But I'm just highlighting this because so many of our people, so many of us are affected in the workplace by, the racists, by these organized groups that want to terrorize us in the workplace. And I'm saying, don't be isolated, don't be vulnerable. make sure that you join Black workers groups, Black sections in the union, and get yourself the support you need and build a family network around you. Let's go over to the chat as we begin to wrap up. Brother Kwame Aboje, rise up, Brother Kwame Aboje. Always great to have you in the house. He says, I am unapologetic, independent, Pan-African activist. Brother Kwame also says, William O'Reilly was found to have plagiarized his work, his thesis, but nothing happened and he did not lose his job. That's right. PhD means pull him down, isn't it? When it comes to us, yeah, it means pulling down indeed. Kwame says, even Rachel Reeves plagiarized and she is now a Labour politician. They make me sick. It's just evil, absolutely scandalous. And Dan Govey says, let me show you some of these comments. Actually, I can go over to the comment section. Oh my gosh. Sister Shanice, have you noticed more killing in America? The youngest hanging from a tree outside a church, a 16-year-old girl. They're doing it again. I mean, well, how many more is it going to take? Yeah, how much more of this is it going to take, Sound of Music, before our people take action? You know, because them not gonna stop until we do something about it. That's the reality. Them naga stop, and the young girl has been named a 16-year-old Juliana Nitzta was found dead hanging from a tree. We're going to have to look at that maybe for next strong, what's going on right now in America, because this isn't anything new. Family. Baba Kwame Aboje says, Baba Garvey was plotted not only by the pigs of the FBI, but Negro sellouts, including Dubois, A. Philip Randolph, and Cyril Briggs. Rise up, beloved, true talk. Dessa. And let's see what Nina says. Nina says, the traitors who went against our own people must also be called out, and their lineages. Absolutely. You know, because that sellout, treasonous, treacherous trait is still among and in our community. Rise up to Moja, who says, yes, Hoover was a vile pig and hated others because they reminded him of himself. Yes, indeed. And as has been said, we still have those traitors among us today. Look at some of the African leaders that we've got today working against their own population. You know, all in agreement there about that Hoover traitor. Kwame says that's their pathetic categorization that labeled Brother Malcolm. Yes, indeed. Only issue I had with Marcus Garvey and UIA is that some of his followers conspired to have a popular ethnic Ghanaian woman killed. That one escapes me. I need to look into that. Okay, family. So we're at that time now, 3 minutes away from the top of the hour. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today and for staying with me in the show today, where we've been talking about the hounding, the really awful, despicable hounding of our young Black professor. And we've been looking back in our history, and I've been highlighting the fact that this is something that we have been suffering for centuries. It's just taken on now, you know, a different kind of mode. And we need to protect our children who are in these institutions and organizations and who are likely to have to face racism head on. And we need to learn to put our money back into our communities. Absolutely. I can't believe, you know, what some of our Black leaders are doing right now, investing so much in an organization whose head speaks of them as the Black people behind the stage. Rise up, rise up. Cowards always playing mind games. Yes, indeed. I'm going to look into some of these incidences that's been happening in America, Sound of Music. Thanks for highlighting that, because again, this is an awful part of our history that they're trying to bring back. And if we don't put a stop to it, it's going to be happening more and more. And our brothers and sisters in America need to work out what they need to do to put a stop to it. Because as Sister Kev says, they're killing us off and we've got to put a stop to it. Just like, you know, the kidnapping of us as an enslaved person started with one person and we didn't put a stop to it. And before we knew it, there were millions of us enslaved. If we don't put a stop to this lynching soon, there'll be lynching in the hundreds every week. We know they've got an insatiable appetite for that sort of thing. So family, stay strong, stay powerful. And yeah, please share the works of this platform. Thank you so, so much for tuning in. More love, more strength. Sister Shanice out of here for now. Thank you, each and every one of us. Please rejoin me, same time, 8 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. GMT time, next strong. Bye for now.